Please welcome Russell Schrader, Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and panelists for Staying Competitive, Why Privacy is Good for Your Business.
Hi, welcome back after lunch. And again, thank you very much to LinkedIn for providing a terrific space and a wonderful lunch. I appreciate it. And so I would like to now bring up my my fellow panelists. As you see, Michelle Dennedy, whom you have heard from earlier today, and our host, Finneran, please come on up. And we are going to talk about, why privacy is good for your business. And because the three.
You can't complain. I'm much shorter.
You can, but no one cares. All right, basically, we've known each other so long. I've been talking about a lot of tips. Clinda, you're very brave to join us since we established earlier today that Michelle is the meanest mom in the Bay Area because of the way she restricts her use in her house or
My
doors.
girls will tell you all about it.
Okay, and I used Michelle's article to show my son as to, I'm not the meanest person. So now I'm merely the meanest dad in the Bay Area when it comes to use of the internet. So, but that was the morning. Now we're going to talk about why privacy is good for business. And because the three of us could talk for 25 minutes on almost any aspect of it, I've structure the conversation around three questions. Okay. All right. There's been
a trivia show here.
It is. It is.
The holy
Okay.
trinity of security and privacy.
All right. It's been a big shift in the privacy landscape over the past few years. Right. Privacy is no longer nice to have. It's a must-have. It not only is it a must-have, it has to be a priority. What are the unique things that companies are doing, yours and others, because you certainly see across a wide variety of companies that are doing to leverage this new reality, and how can people in this room and online take some tips away to leverage that momentum as well?
Great. Should I get started?
Please.
All right. So at LinkedIn, privacy was built into the foundation of the organization, which makes it a lot easier. For those of you who are in organizations where it wasn't something the founders thought of from the origination, it can be a little bit harder. But we've had it at our core since our founding, and members first is a value that we here at LinkedIn all know about. And that means treating our members' data or anything we do with our members, putting their needs, their priorities first before we do anything with it. So just having that simple corporate value makes a lot of things fall into place for our organization. And as you and Michelle both know, one of the challenges in our positions in companies is convincing folks at the C-suite that these are issues that matter, that customers do care. And that's one of the things I wanted to touch on from the earlier speakers. Is a lot was said about what companies can do. And the three of us up here are some of those who are working in companies to try to make sure that companies are doing the right things and paying attention to these issues. But I think it's also on consumers to show companies that they care and that they will act if their privacy is not respected. And I think that's one of the things that consumers can do to start making this matter. But as a company, we are working to continue to build a culture of privacy. So we do that through a lot of really exciting training programs we put in place. We have a privacy champion program, which we just instituted this year. And it's a 6-month-long program that we encourage our employees to apply for. They have to be accepted into the program. They have to take the CIPP. And the idea is to get people outside of the legal department, because so much of privacy is focused in legal and security. What we have to do is get people outside of those areas of companies also thinking about it, because they're also dealing with the data on a day-to-day basis. So we're trying to create some experts throughout our organization.
So many good points. So I think I'll pick apart some of those points and kind of add to, because these are best practices for every business.
Yeah.
Training in the way that your employees need it, looking at the things that are strong. Oh, sorry. I was like, are you waving? Hi. He's saying, no, I can't hear you, woman. So that's good, patching and fixing on the fly. So hearing and knowing what your core values are. So at Cisco, we do business in over 120 countries directly, and we have over 300,000 business partners and business associates, some of whom get data, some do not. But our core value and our brand for the past 30-some years has been core engineering and stability. So when I think about our newer services in cloud computing, in identity management, and the other SaaS-type security as a service businesses that we're in, we take that core culture, so users first, or what are they called?
Members first.
Members first. So for us, it really is engineering first, engineering led. And so we have a program internally called the Security Ninja Program, and that's quite an old program. What we did when we started up the privacy practice here is add stripes. So the ninjas get different kind of tools and accolades and rewards. And if you're in a technical environment, you understand that these little incremental kudos, along with intellectual property encouragement, these are the things that spur on not just awareness, but action. And I think action in this space is everything.
Absolutely. I do think that those are very useful tips that are scalable throughout any line of business and any size of business as well. One of the things we talked about earlier today also is whether the privacy dimension is changing with GDPR, what's going on in Asia as well as in Europe, and that some of the different turnover issues, potential criminal sanctions, and the rest of it, the opt-in, opt-out construct as well, seems to be not working the way that people thought it would. But looking into a crystal ball here, and we're having this conversation, say, 5 years from now, what do you think is the future of privacy?
Wow, that's a very good question. I think that we have seen so much shift just over the past 5 years. Keep in mind, the Snowden revelations were, 2012, 2013. That was an awakening for a lot of people around caring about this issue. For those of us in the privacy profession, I think it was the first time we could say to people who weren't in the profession that what we did, and they got some inkling of maybe what we do for a living. So people have started caring about this issue. And I think in the next 5 years, what we're going to see is, as IoT rises, as we have more and more AI, I think companies are going to, after what we've been through with GDPR, we've all had a bit of a reset trying to prepare for that. And I think that we're all going to be in a position to grow, hopefully more with the technology, with this foundation that we've created as a result of GDPR. And I hope that we'll be seeing consumers be a bit more proactive as a result. So one of the things that GDPR is requiring a lot of organizations to do, ours included, is to really give our members greater controls, more minute control over their data and decision-making power. What I hope we're going to see is people taking advantage of that more, and organizations stepping up to that, and then consumers becoming better educated and more aware of just how much data they are putting out and what controls they have to manage that.
How do you see the education piece working? Where does that lie? Is it a government mandate? Is it a parental thing? Is it a media thing? Is it prescriptive that then gets eased off as education? Or what's your kind of view as to where education could kick in?
Yes.
I've never heard that short an answer from you, Michelle. Tell me more.
I don't think anyone has heard that short of an answer even before I could speak. But the answer is yes, it is reaching consumers, and I keep using that word, but I really mean humans. So whether you're at work, whether you're at play, whether you are, like so many of us, in between. I'm working in airports. I'm also calling into my kid's school to see what time I need to pick her up. And the next breath, I'm arranging cocktails with my friend Jax. So the blended, just on time, education, training, awareness, I would love to see a television show that goes viral, like Black Mirror, that I think shows and asks, who's not watching Black Mirror in this room? Okay, you have an assignment, you have an assignment. Don't start with the first one, start with season 3. Right, am I right? But I think shows like that show the dark side of data. They are the twilight zone for our generation. So I love those kinds of opportunities because they are education and awareness to a point. I think also professional schools, it used to be that you could get a law degree without getting a separate ethics credential and having a continuing legal education requirement. I think the days of not having an ethics credential in engineering, they are starting to sunset. We need to have our technical people understand how to do privacy and ethics engineering. We need our legal people to be at least articulate in technology. We need our school teachers to respect and understand that a child sitting in your classroom is one point of light of that person's entire data day. And so you don't own that information. When I go to Boy Scouts after school, I don't own that information. When I go to church, I don't own that information. So instead, we need to get this built into the fabric of our cultures and society as a value, and then we need to treat it as if it's valuable.
Yeah, the integration, I think, in the just-in-time learning is absolutely important. And if you did start with a good Black Mirror episode, Shut Up and Dance totally creeped me out.
They all creep me out.
But that one being tied particularly into the logical effects of cyberbullying is something that is particularly surprising. But for you, please.
Oh, so Russ, I was just going to add on to what Michelle said. I think there's another really important component that as a mother, I feel really strongly about. And Michelle and I, our kids went to the same school. Michelle actually used to do a course for parents at the school on how to manage security and privacy for your kids. And so one of the things that I feel really strongly parents need to do too is begin to talk to our kids about technology, because they are the generation that is growing up with their entire identity online. That's something most of us can't relate to, because it wasn't until we were in our 20s, well, for some of us, that the internet began hitting, right? And so I know there's a lot of millennials who maybe it came a little sooner, but for kids today, this is from even prior to being born. How many people have seen parents putting their children's ultrasounds up on Facebook? So it is a really important issue and something we need to start talking to kids about and teaching in society.
Absolutely, and employees too. I think the ye old training was when you got your badge, you signed some document saying, the company owns my patents, and I promise not to do any mischief online, and that was kind of set and forget. And then, 20 years later, or 2 years if you're a millennial, you are amazingly still the same company, and you probably haven't had a refresh. That's right. So we need to understand, what is the data accountancy? How do you actually measure for data competency from a commercial perspective, from a cultural perspective, and a human perspective?
And when you talk about why that's good for business, absolutely. You can tie that back into metrics and success, and using new measurement tools, using new tracking tools, using new collaboration tools that make it more efficient and more geographically diverse workforce to move forward.
So can I be shameless for a moment? Okay, I'm going to be shameless.
I was thinking about the time limit rather than the shamelessness part, actually.
12 more minutes.
Okay.
So I'm very excited about metrics. As these guys know, we've been talking for a long time about how do we measure this, how do we sell it to the C-suite, how do we sell it to the director suite that actually gets things done, and the new people coming on board. And so we put out, we at Cisco are coming out with our first benchmark study for privacy maturity and its relationship specifically to business. So I put out a white paper today called Good Privacy is Good for Business. And there's two correlations. One is when we queried double-blind studies, so they weren't being nice to me, not that they would, but hypothetically, 3,000 people over 20 different nations. What we found is 65% of these business leaders are reporting a slowdown in business based on privacy and security concerns. And on the high end, we're talking about 16 plus weeks of delay of closing a transaction. Most of your sales forces are gold every 3 months. So you can imagine the cacophony of problems when you are getting that kind of sales delay and uncertainty. When you correlate that to privacy maturity, programmatic compurity, is that even a thing? It is. It is now compurity, maturity under the GAPI scale, 0 to 5. We find that if you get to at least a level 3 in maturity of self-attested programming, double-blind study, we're finding that you're taking 70% of the risk of loss and a speed up of business that can be down as low as 2 weeks or less. So going from 4 months delay to 2 weeks delay, it's a trend, it's not causation, but I'm gonna put it out there that we're gonna keep measuring this, and I bet what we're gonna find is the more competency we see with data on security and privacy matters, the better it's gonna be for your business.
Michelle, was that basically just on privacy, or was it privacy and security as an issue together?
So the overall study came out of the data that we were putting together. We have an annual cybersecurity report.
Yeah.
We specifically got a little bit of space to do privacy in specific. So these are privacy metrics.
That's great. It's such a hard thing to measure.
Exactly.
And that's why this panel about discussing about how it impacts business has always been so hard. Because, the question that I remember I raised this issue first up at Nintendo back in 2008 or 9. And the response I got was, well, why should we care when Facebook's continuing to grow and yet they're getting slammed in the press on privacy? And that's a very relevant question. And one, surprisingly, that still exists today, because people, yes, they have more controls over data on a lot of social media, but people still engage. And I think the key thing to remember is that people do care and they're using those settings. And the more we can find ways to show how much people are using settings, how much people are more willing to engage when they trust a company, things like what you're showing, that we can't close deals until this issue is resolved, it really helps to get that message out.
Absolutely, and I think more and more we're going to start measuring artifacts that will become correlates that we can follow as a trend. So when I first joined Cisco, I sat down with John Chambers, who is the former CEO and chairman of our board, and I'd say a pretty good business guy. He's done all right. And now a VC in the Valley. And I said to John, as a privacy neophyte, what are you looking for as chairman of the board of a $60 billion multinational company, knowing that when you follow the gross stock trend, every time following a major breach, you see a dip and then you see a pop. Mm-hmm. And whether that is they're getting good and they've had to recover and had to implement security controls, we don't know. But I also want to say that the investors and the board composition are primarily former salespeople and maybe a lawyer here and there and a finance person. So we don't have the diversity of boards to measure our profession yet. I think that's changing. Mm-hmm. I think so. That's factor number one. And what John said to me was really the inspiration for doing the study. He said, I don't necessarily need granular causality because I expect that you are doing your job, which is kind of like a gulp moment of like, oh crap, I better make sure I'm doing that. But what he does need from a board level is what is the trend, whether or not we have perfect causality. We as engineers want that perfect reason causality one-to-one, but what we have to understand about how business is led and how risk is measured today is on trend. So if we create trends, the stock market is just a trend. A piece of currency is just a trend. And those are all data relational trends that we can start to measure and study. And before you know it, we'll have a very rich set of data trends that we can correlate. And maybe it'll be ice cream causing summer, but it does help us to stock more cream before the weather gets hot.
That's very true. Part of it, when you talk about the trend and looking at the industry rather than going forward, it's that old St. Augustine thing. Dear God, make me good.
I love
just
that you're quoting
yet.
St. Augustine. He's so good.
Yeah. Well, yes, thank you, but that'll be the only one. But it just people are looking for those trends, and you try to get ahead of them rather than following. But you also look at, I think, what's happened with the data breach notices. Right. Originally, they were designed so that you could do something about that information, and then they started being about, a walk of shame, and then they started to be about everyday business. It just is what another one, right? Here's another replacement card, here's another, whatever. And whether that's become a new normal, how do we get beyond that, and how do we push that to be say, oh, it's just a cost of business, and look at that.
Well, I think consumers are getting more.
Sorry,
you're
I don't
ringing
even
a
know how
lot.
to
You've
turn
got a
it
lot of
off.
stuff going on over there.
Susan, can I give you this? Susan, can I give you this thing? Please take it away from me.
I think on the data breach issue, that there are a lot of consumers beginning to get. Someone's got to take Michelle's phone.
Sorry, here we go.
Oh
my gosh! Oh, sorry, Susan. Okay, when there's an OSHA claim, I did that. I own that. I'm sorry, Susan. Oh no. Sorry.
Edit it out.
Edit it out.
All right. So on the data breach issue, I think people have become a little immune to it because we do get so many. And when you have something as big as Equifax, where none of us had any control over it, and it was a tremendous amount of data, people become a bit immune. That doesn't mean, though, that they're not still useful and important and that people aren't still acting upon them. And I think that's one place where we've seen business recognize, whereas before people would often just have a data breach and not say anything. If you think about 10, 15 years ago, it was like, well, let's see if anybody notices and keep going, right? Now, not only thanks to the laws, but also due to the fact that people just expect that. It's common, it's expected, and I'm hoping that's kind of where we get where in the future when we think about settings and controls for people. People are going to understand them the same way they understand a data breach now. It's part of doing business. People get that. They understand how to manage it. So it doesn't cause, when you get that letter, it doesn't cause you to completely freak out and try to stop all your accounts and everything. You know some of the steps you need to take and what you need to do to figure out if you've got a problem.
And I think as tired as we are as consumers of hearing the stories again and again and again, when it happens to you on the inside, when it's a business person or whether it's you as the consumer, it's important, it's costly, it's disruptive of business. So don't think that there's not a lot of scrambling behind the scenes just because you hear about data breaches a lot. I still think that that is a useful tool to have disclosure and have at least a modicum of transparency. I think we need better recovery tools. I think we can't just tell people, I'm going to monitor your stuff. I think we have to have better things to give consumers controls after there's been a massive event.
Absolutely. There is a need for additional controls in the case of new account opening rather than just account diversion. And perhaps looking at other ID forms and the social security numbers that we've seen in the past. And there's a lot of work from a technical point as well as policy point to consider as well.
And some of it too is the stories that are not as well known. So I just recently read a report about the hottest trend right now is ransomware or large number of health data capture. And initially I thought it was healthcare fraud. So I don't have healthcare, I use your healthcare, I get to do whatever I do for free. The meta societal issue is no, when you get a lot of healthcare data and then you test because you can buy a credit card to match that healthcare account, what the baddies do is they test it and then as quickly as they can while that account is still good, using your real healthcare data and your real insurance dollars, they go to the pill farms and get as many opiates out as they can and add to the opiate crisis. So it's not a matter of replacing a credit card. It's not a matter of one inconvenient, horrible thing that happens. This is also a societal security issue, a food integrity issue, an opiate addiction issue, and it's a global issue. So I hope that wasn't too depressing.
It's sobering. No, there is a lot of work to do, and it does go to show the importance of what we do. It goes far beyond just what we think it's about. It's not about sending a letter out to a number of people. It's not about a 1 or 2 day story. It's not about a congressional hearing in the most extreme cases. It really goes to the fabric of society today, and it just shows things there. Now, if we were to pick one thing that people should take away with that's sort of actionable in almost any size business, what would that one item be?
So I think one of the things companies need to start doing, and in the past, I think you could say it was specific, improve your security, or create a privacy policy, or things like that. We're way past that stage. So at this point, I think what a lot of companies need to do is make sure that it's not just your legal and security departments who know how to handle data, but it's your entire company. Because everybody in a company is going to have access to data and have responsibility for it. And so one of the things that I think is really key and something that we have been lucky enough to build here at LinkedIn is a culture of privacy within an organization. So finding a way for that issue to touch every employee so that they understand the importance in their own personal lives as well as their role in protecting the data of the people that they serve.
Absolutely. I have 2 tips. One is don't throw phones at Susan. That doesn't work, especially when she's got cute boots on. The other thing is, we've got 4 seconds, privacy engineering. Engineering happens at the usability level, it happens at the information layer, and it happens at the infrastructure layer. It includes identity management, includes data hoarding, otherwise known as data storage, and data hygiene everywhere in between.
Okay. Thank you very much to both of you. I had a great time. I think we covered, shall we say, a very wide range, including Netflix suggestions. And I look
That's your
forward.
assignment tonight.
I look forward to having this conversation on an ongoing basis. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, gosh, you're so annoying.